Joining me now from Beijing to discuss what's going on in Dushanbe is Qinduo Xu. He's a senior fellow with the Pangoal Institution, as well as the host of CGTN's Dialogue Weekend. First, why don't we start with the news that these foreign ministers, China, Russia, Pakistan, all of them coming together and basically saying, and Iran, I should mention, stepping up communication will be key. Give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think, if you look at it, first of all, Afghanistan is surrounded basically by SCO countries, plus Iran, which is expected to be officially accepted as a full member of SCO. So, of course, Iran's participation is critical because Iran has experience to deal with the drug trafficking and immigration issue, for example. So now the top priorities for regional countries includes, for example, terrorism issue. They expect the Taliban-led government to cooperate on that. For example, don't let the country be used to launch any kind of violent attack against any countries. And there's immigration crisis issue. The country is, economically shattered. They need a lot of help. And of course, you have a drug trafficking issue. So all those kind of issues will affect directly or indirectly with SCO countries. So that's their priority. We don't expect this, one summit meeting to solve all the issues, but at least, when they stress about the communication with the Afghan government, I think it partly reflects their approach to deal with Afghanistan. That is based on equality, respect. There's a new government. We respect your sovereignty. We would like to talk to you about what you can do, what do you want us to help, and how can we help to deal with those challenges.
I think it was July when you and I were talking about foreign ministers. There was a sense of alarm. SCO members issued a joint statement back then. They basically pledging to help Afghan people rebuild. But one of the key points they were making was that they want the country peaceful, stable, and prosperous. And you almost get a sense of urgency now that the Taliban has taken control and the U.S. forces have left for all the reasons you just mentioned, including the fact that there could be a humanitarian crisis, the economy in tatters. Give me a sense of what you think can come out of this meeting where there can actually be some kind of effect in terms of change.
Well, I think for those countries that will adjust their positions and their policies. Remember, they don't exactly on the same page. For example, Tajikistan, the host country, had their issues, their concern about whether the government is inclusive enough, or whether the Tajiks, about 30% of the population in Afghanistan are Tajiks, whether their rights will be protected, be represented in the government, for example. And Pakistan is more closely involved in Taliban Afghan affairs. So India they have different consideration about the situation, but also they have a lot in common, as you said, Mike. Stability, no terrorism, peaceful, because these are the common interests of all the countries in SCO. That is, they would like to see a stable and a peaceful Afghanistan. But if you want to achieve that right now, the immediate change is to deal with this humanitarian crisis, international assistance, and for that, what the Afghan government needs to do, and how the SCO countries can help, and to what degree, and in what way. So there will be some adjustment, some communication, and what they can do to support, at least politically, diplomatically, and economically. I would say that's very possible.
You mentioned that some of these SCO members border Afghanistan, of course, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Pakistan, but even China has a 76-kilometer border with Afghanistan. It's a sliver, but it's still a border. We've seen what happens when war ends. Refugees can spill over into other countries. There's also, of course, the fear. You mentioned it. It could be an incubator for terrorist groups. So what are some of the things that are going through the minds of these leaders as they try and come up with some kind of position to help with the situation in Afghanistan?
Good question, Mike. I think many countries, for example, the refugee crisis. If you look at the regional countries, Pakistan actually hosts a couple of millions of refugees from Afghanistan, and the second is actually Iran. They host tens of thousands of refugees from Afghanistan. So yes, there's a refugee crisis. and they are already hosting a great number of people, and probably for them, it's difficult for them to host more refugees, for example. Of course, you would love to see Afghan people stay in the country, but at least they need to be fed, they need to have a decent life. So that's the immediate challenge. And also in the four countries, in terms of security, as you mentioned, for China, Xinjiang, EGIM, the terror group, some of the fighters, at least they are suspected, are still inside Afghanistan. Of course, Taliban said that they are all driven out of the country. But I guess a lot of people are trying to see, whether that can be confirmed, whether where are they, and how safe that is for Xinjiang or for China as a whole. And also refugees, neighboring countries have also concerned some of the potential terror elements could be mingled with refugees into their countries. They have their own terrorism issue, separatism issue, extremism, etc. So yes, that's also a concern. That's a part of the reason why some of the countries, are kind of reluctant to open their door to the refugees if you don't have I would say, a screening process about the people identification, for example.
Yeah.